What's up guys, welcome to another MXA tested video. This time we're diving into the 2022 Kawasaki KX450SR. The SR on this bike stands for Special Racer, and it has been the same initials used by factory Kawasaki riders on their graphics for a long time now, even going back to James Stewart when he rode for the Kawasaki team on 250 and 125 two-strokes. The KX450SR is Kawasaki's first ever factory edition 450, and it follows the trend that the manufacturers have been going with since KTM built their first factory edition 450 for Ryan Dungey way back in 2010. However, Kawasaki and Honda are different from KTM and Husky in that their factory editions are modified versions of the current bike, while the KTM Husky factory editions are previews of what's to come on the next model. The Kawasaki and Honda 450s don't have new frames, engines, airboxes, bodywork, subframes, or a new swing arm, but they do get a healthy dose of aftermarket bling for their factory edition bikes. Let's dive into a quick list of the 10 major updates that Kawasaki made to the KX450, turning it into a KX450SR. Diving into the mods on the engine, the cylinder head features a ported and polished intake track now, and everything was cleaned up to a bright and shiny finish to flow air in and out of the engine easier. Second on the list, the 450SR gains a complete Pro Circuit Ti 6 Pro titanium exhaust system. Number 3 on the list, the ECU fuel injection mapping has been refined specifically for this engine. And number 4 on the list, which is a big update, the stock 49mm Showa forks have been replaced by 48mm Kiyaba forks, and the Showa shock was also replaced by KYB shock as well. The fork legs have a DLC coating on the fork tubes, which increases the surface hardness to prevent scratches and rock dings. Additionally, the inside of the fork's sanction tubes have a hard coat, low friction surface treatment to help reduce stiction on the initial part of the fork stroke. And of course, the KX450SR gets the side benefits of the proprietary Kiyaba design, which includes a larger 25mm cartridge piston and the race team's smaller 22mm front axle on the front wheel as well. Number 5 on the list, the stock forged Kawasaki triple clamps have been replaced by X-Trig's ROCKS, which is a revolutionary opposing clamp system triple clamps, and they gained the PHDS progressive handlebar damping system bar mounts as well. Number 6 on the list, the 450SR clutch cover has a larger volume, and it comes with the billet machined Hinson clutch cover with Kawasaki Racing Team engraved into it. However, there are no actual Hinson parts inside of the clutch. Number 7 on the list, Kawasaki touts that the KX450SR comes with DID Dirt Star STX rims, but a quick check of the stock 22 KX450 reveals that they're actually the same black anodized DID rims are on both the production model and the Special Racer. The only difference is that the Kawasaki KX450SR rims are imprinted with the white DID Dirt Star STX logo, so no real structural difference there, just cosmetic. Number 8 on the list, a DID gold chain runs on black anodized Renthal rear sprocket. Number 9 on the list, the KX450 gets the Kawasaki Race Team's team-inspired color and graphics. And number 10 on the list, the subframe has been reinforced where it has been prone to breaking under the weight of the stock muffler and other aftermarket mufflers. Now the new subframe fits on the late model KX450s and just beefs that up to be a little more durable, so you won't have that issue there for Kawasaki riders. Along with these 10 major updates, the KX450 also went up in price. Now it retails for $12,400. For comparison, that is the exact same retail price of the 2022 Honda CRF 450 Works Edition model, and it's $700 more than the 2022 and a half KTM 450 Factory Edition. For comparison, the stock Kawasaki KX450 price is $9,599, making the SR model $2,800 more than the stock KX450. As for the weight, the KX450SR hits the scales at 233.5 pounds, which is a half pound less than the stock KX450, a half pound more than the stock Honda CRF 450, and 10 pounds more than the stock KTM 450. Alright, now let's get into the fun stuff. how did the KX450SR run on the track? Every MXA test rider loved the KX450SR power band, and we all raved about how smooth it was off the bottom and how linear it is to ride through the middle and top end of the power band. This thing is also blazing fast on top. It has a seamless power that you don't find on many bikes, even if that's what every R&D department is aiming for. After breaking in the engine and the suspension, we took it to the dyno along with our KTM 450 Factory Edition and Honda CRF 450 Works Edition at the same time. As usual, we like to dyno the bikes on the same day just to control all variables, making sure they're as accurate as possible. The dyno numbers confirmed everything that the MXA test riders say about the KX450SR engine. On the dyno, the three bikes, the Honda, KTM, and Kawasaki Factory Editions, are virtually identical from 5,000 to 7,200 RPM, and from 7,300 RPM to 9,000, the KX450 was on top, but at 10,200 RPM, it was passed by the KTM 450 SXF Factory Edition just by a half a horsepower to the sign-off. The RPM victory by KTM doesn't really mean very much, as it was 1,800 RPM after peak horsepower, which on these bikes was around 9,500 RPM. The KX450SR peaked at 60.5 horsepower. The Honda CRF 450 Works Edition pumped out 60.1, and the KTM Factory Edition was 59.85. So it's safe to say that all of the 450 Factory Editions are going extremely fast this year. The big surprise for us was how much the KX450SR power output jumped up from the stock bike, which only produced 56.9 horsepower. So that's a pretty big gain to get with just a Pro Circuit exhaust, remapped ECU, and a touched up intake track. We fully expected the CRF 450 Works Edition and KTM Factory Edition engines to be strong because they were already strong to begin with and only needed to gain 1.5 horsepower over their stock brothers to be bumping up against 60 horses. The horsepower difference between the weak sister KX450 stock model and the revitalized KX450SR was an amazing 3.6 horsepower. And although the KX450SR power band jumped up big time on the dyno charts, the power was definitely not too much on the track. It was still brisk, steady, and non-confrontational. It delivered a nice spread of power that was always just right for whatever situation was at hand. We love this engine, but we can't help wonder why Kawasaki didn't remap the ECU, they didn't make a production version of the Pro Circuit pipe, and they didn't run a Dremel through the intake port of the stock KX450 4 years ago. This bike has always been low on the power totem pole, and we just wish that Kawasaki would have done these same updates back in 2019 and 2020 when this model first came out. Diving into the suspension on the KX450SR, this is something that most people who don't regularly ride Kawasaki's might not realize, but the 2022 KX250 comes with KYB suspension, and the 2022 KX450, the stock model, comes with Showa suspension. So for this KX450SR model, it was unique that they spec'd KYB suspension on this bike. It was also believed to be a Eli Tomac Factory Edition before Eli made the choice to switch to Star Racing Yamaha, as Tomac used to ride with KYB suspension on his Kawasaki. So KYB got the lucky assignment to replace and fix the suspension on the KX450, and although Showa has a coil spring forks on the Honda and Suzuki 450s and KX450, the stock model, they all come too soft. KYB, all they had to do was make the fork a little bit stiffer with compression dampening, and they would be hailed as a savior, and that is exactly what they did. Also, the DLC coating on the KYB fork legs isn't as great of an increase and isn't as big of a deal on this bike because the Showa forks that come stock on this model already have this. In general, the handling of the KX450 is very stable and super comfortable for most of the MXA test riders. Our pro test riders, they did think that the KYB forks should be stiffened up even more, but it's not usually pros that are buying $12,400 production bikes. We hate to say it, but the target customer for the 2022 Kawasaki KX450SR is a rich 40-year-old vet rider. Overall, Kawasaki made some big updates to the KX450SR model, which were an answer to our requests. We really appreciate the faster KX450 engine that is super smooth, super manageable, and super easy to ride. We appreciate the KYB suspension that is much more balanced, much more comfortable, and just holds up a lot better for a wide range of our test riders. And we like the Kawasaki fixed the major issue they have with their subframes breaking at the muffler mount by beefing that up on the the KX450SR model. Didn't have any problems with that. However, we still have a long list of complaints on the KX450 that we wish Kawasaki would have updated for this model. The KX450 is known for overheating easily, and we always run a 2.0 twin air ice flow radiator cap on this bike. The fork guards shatter when you look at them funny. Normally, we break the fork guards on our KX models in the first race or two, but the KX450SR fork guard broke during our first hour of riding this bike on a practice day. We weren't even in a race and it broke. We also wish that you could change the mapping easier on this bike instead of adjusting the old school white, black, and green couplers to switch between maps. A major complaint we have on the KX450SR is the touchy, grabby, and squeaky 250mm rear brake rotor. It's way too much rear brake for the rear wheel, and it's annoying when Kawasaki puts the 240 rotor on the KX250 and the KX450X cross-country bike, but not on their KX450 or KX450SR models. You don't need this much rear brake, and it causes you to skid the rear wheel coming into corners a lot easier and just mess up your flow through the corners if you just touch the rear brake. It's far too much in the rear. Plus, you can only adjust the rear brake upwards and you can't lower it, which makes this problem even worse. Plus, the KX450SR comes with X-Trig's PHDS bar mounts, which are nice if you're a really tall rider and comfortable for those kind of guys, but for the most part, the MXA test riders prefer the lighter and lower X-Trig fixed bar mount, which brings the handlebars down to a more neutral position and better for our test riders. This may seem like a lot of complaining already, but we aren't done yet. This bike has the worst front brake and clutch levers that are too skinny and don't even match. The lower chain roller blows apart super quickly. The lower 8mm airbox cover bolt strips out the threads in the aluminum subframe super easily as well. The T-plate insert that holds the rear fender on falls to the ground every time you remove the upper airbox cover bolt that also works as the side seat bolt. For that, we fix it with running a Bolt MX hardware T-plate that doesn't fall out. Overall, the KX450SR, if it had been in the 2022 450 MXA shootout, it would have standed a good chance of winning, but only if the Kawasaki engineers had spec'd a smaller rear brake rotor, contemporary electronic switchgear, improved durability, a longer lasting chain roller, high pressure radiator cap, and better plastic. After listening to the last few minutes of complaints about this bike, you might think that the MXA Wrecking Crew doesn't like the KX450SR, but that's not true. We only are hard on this bike because we see the potential that it has, and we appreciate the super easy to ride, smooth 60 horsepower KX450SR engine that it has for 2022, and we love the KYB suspension that it has as well. Very comfortable for a stock setting for most of the MXA test riders. However, we have big goals for this bike, and we see the potential it has, so when they miss the mark by running a rear brake rotor that is way too big, or just knocking down the durability of small items on this bike that could be updated from what seems like so easily, it really gets under our skin. So we do appreciate the KX450SR. However, there are these things that you will have to keep an eye out if you buy this bike and you're going to keep it in your own garage for the next year or so. Thank you guys for tuning into this video. As always, Motocross Action Wrecking Crew, we do our best to give you guys accurate testing reporting on these bikes, telling you the pros and cons of each model. If you guys like this video, be sure to let us know in the comments and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with more MXA test videos. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.